everyone, and welcome to the new era with NEXERA. My name is Cheryl Weedmark with Into Communications, and Wes McCarter, president of NEXERA, is joining me as well. Today, our conversation is based around something that is called first call effectiveness. And what we're going to try to do is help you understand as the viewer the importance of having your service technician, as an example, be capable and able to repair a device after the first call, as opposed to having to have them come back and potentially come back 2, 3, even 4 times to solve the problem. So Wes, let's start by talking about why this is such an important topic, especially right now.
Well, for most companies, manpower is dictated by the number of service calls that come in from the customer. So if I have a response time target of say 4 hours, and I have X amount of calls coming in order to meet that 4-hour response time, I have to staff accordingly so that I can meet that number. So first call effectiveness is critical because it's a measurement that allows me to determine how effective the tech resolves that customer's complaint on the first visit. The industry as a whole doesn't calculate first call effectiveness while they use that definition. They use what we would call total call effectiveness. So they're looking and measuring how effective are they at fixing the first call, but it's against all of the calls they do, rather than the customer complaint going, I have a service call, what happens next?
Okay, so you referenced total call effectiveness. So then how would you actually define first call effectiveness?
So first call effectiveness is exactly that. When I'm measuring the effectiveness of the technician, I'm measuring it against the first call. So when the customer places a service call, if they call back the next day because it's not fixed, I was 100% ineffective because I required the technician to go back the next day. If that technician then in turn did not have the parts and had to go back for a third time, my callback, or that instance where I had to go back, is still 100% because it's against the one call that the customer placed, right? Now I have a 33% hole for part problem because out of the 3 calls I did, one of them was a hole for part. What the industry would suggest is that in the first instance, they had a 50% callback rate because they had 2 total calls, one of which was a callback. Then when they did the hole for part call, their callback rate dropped to 33%, and their hole for part rate is 33%. So we believe that the measurement itself is by definition measuring the ability to fix it on the first call, not how well you fix all of the calls you do.
Okay, so that's the difference between the two. Do you think that dealers need to specifically look at their service data in order to understand the norm of how we're doing business?
Yes, absolutely. There's 2 key critical components to this measurement as a whole. One is their ERP and how their systems are set up to measure this. So for the math component of it, almost every ERP in the market does total calls, even though it's called first call. So that's the first problem, is that when they look at their numbers, they're measuring the effectiveness of all the calls they do rather than just the first call. And then second is the criteria used to measure it with. Virtually every system is set up to measure this on a very broad brush stroke. So in our industry, we use segments, for example, and they will apply a criteria that's good for every segment has its own. Mm-hmm. What we do is we actually use it by model, and we compare it to our national statistics. So we have over 4 million devices in our database, and we watch how that equipment performs because it changes over its life cycle. New equipment tends to have issues related to customer operation errors, and technician training. Then it gets better. Then it gets worse as it ages. And so our criteria constantly evolves relative to how that product performs in the field. So it's very objective.
Okay, so when it comes to servicing printers and copiers specifically, why would you say improved FCE or first call effectiveness? Why is that so important?
Well, it has 2 primary goals. One is to improve the customer's experience because they're not going to be seeing that individual as often when they do have a problem. But for the dealership, from a profitability standpoint, it dictates how many technicians I will have to meet a competitive response time target. So the better I am at resolving it the first time, the fewer calls happen, the fewer technicians I need to do the exact same workload.
So a dealer's watching right now and they're saying, okay, you know, this is great. What can I do? Or is there a way for me to measure against an industry benchmark as an example?
Well, we've always offered an opportunity to do an evaluation for customers. So if they allow us access to the data, we will actually show them a solid benchmark that compares them to everyone else using the exact same criteria. Currently, that does not exist anywhere but with NEXERA. Everyone else's criteria is based on how they set their systems up. So this allows them a very objective way of saying, using the same criteria, how do I compare? And am I within those benchmarks?
So what might be, if you had to just give one suggestion, what might be one suggestion that you might make to either a dealer owner, potentially a service leader, or even an operations manager as an example that might be watching right now?
I think the key is approach any expectations that you've had based on your current measurement with skepticism, because they tend to evolve, and they tend to evolve to tell us what we want to hear rather than what we need to hear. And I would challenge everyone to look at the data that we can provide and go, here's what's real, and here's what the opportunity really is. Because without that standard and without knowing what good looks like, you're simply fooling yourself.
Yeah. You guys have created actually a really great video that's on your YouTube channel with regards to an analogy of the car industry when you're taking your car in. Did you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, it's a great way to put in perspective what first call effectiveness is relative to total call effectiveness and to the customer experience. Because if you look at our industry today, the average dealer's first call effectiveness across all of our customers is about 45%. That means 45% of the time they fix it the first time, the other 55% it takes a subsequent visit. There is no one in the world that would take your car to a dealership that had that level of performance. So we have to up our game and look at this in a different way post-COVID, because the customer's expectations are going to change.
And we're talking about it, you know, from a dealer's perspective and how they should be training their service technicians. But I'm putting my marketing hat on for just a second and talking about the customer experience and the customer journey. And that's obviously a huge part of this as well.
Absolutely. Every customer, especially the customers that experience our top 10% of our dealers, they will actually commend the dealer going, I've never experienced this level of service before. It seems like we never see these technicians anymore, because when we do, they fix it and they never come back. And that's a valuable asset when it comes to not only treating and making sure the customer sees value in the service that you do, but we're a contractual business. The customer needs to justify that service contract. Sometimes we tend to justify it by doing service calls, right? When in reality, what we need to be doing is focusing on the value we bring because we fix it right the first time.
And it allows the service technician to obviously do more calls, which is
Correct.
a great thing for the business. Yeah.
Correct.
Thank you so much, Wes. And for more information, you of course can visit the NEXERA website. We alluded to a video that's on the NEXERA YouTube channel. So we encourage you to watch that, to like and subscribe to that video as well. And we will see you next time on the New Era with NEXERA.
Thanks, Cheryl.